High-need school districts continue to receive less funding than low-need school districts in New York. No big surprise there. This holds true despite an overall increase in school aid from the state. That is according to a report out this week from the New York State Association of School Business Officials. Michael Borges is from that group. He is joining me now in the studio to review the report. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So we should also know, I mean, there's a lot. Obviously, we couldn't in the introduction talk about everything, and we chose to focus on the high-need stuff. But that's definitely something we've been talking about for a long time, the disparity. But we should note that overall, $60 billion in state and federal aid for education in the 13-14 school year.
Correct.
It's a slight increase in the state aid, but you're still below pre-recession levels, which is very troubling and difficult for school districts.
Right. I mean, you've touched upon two of the three main emphases of the report. Was that one is that the state share of school funding is still below. Still hasn't gotten back to pre-recession levels. That the state share has, basically shrunk compared to the local share. That the disparity between high need, poorer school districts and low need, richer school districts still remains about $5,000 per pupil.
Hasn't changed for like 5 years.
Yes, despite 3 years of aid increases. And then the last thing is that the school spending has moderated considerably. And right after the beginning of the Great Recession started in 2009, we went from an average of about 5.5% per year annual increases to about 2.2%.
Right, but
and then continued when the tax cap went into effect in 2011.
But we're still at $22,000 about per pupil, which is higher than anybody else in the nation.
Right, and the governor's correct. But the problem is that he's not asked why. What drives our spending? And if you look at what in our report, what drives school spending, you see that the greatest increases in school spending occurred in pensions, in healthcare, and in special ed. And the majority of those are driven by state mandates.
Yes, he would respond to you, probably. We're trying to do something on the healthcare front. We're moving to more managed care. We're trying to get a hold of Medicaid, et cetera, et cetera. Also, though, in terms of healthcare, that's on the district to negotiate, is it not, with its teachers?
Well, yes, but the state can set the rates,
yes,
which everybody has to comply with. Also, they also run a statewide health insurance plan, NISHIP, which school districts some participate in, but they could do a better job at holding down costs and making it more affordable for schools to participate in.
So that's one aspect that you would probably respond. The second one you respond to is on the pension problem. Well, we put in a 6th year, you're going to see it in 30 years.
30 years, yeah, that's good.
I know, okay.
Right.
So he would say those things. On the third piece, though, that special ed piece, that piece people hate to talk about. Almost nobody talks about that. The governor has not, I understand the governor has not addressed that problem. Even the staunchest education advocates, nobody talks about that, or critics, nobody talks about that problem. Why?
Well, I mean, nobody wants to take away services from needy students.
Yes, but we are so good here that people move from other states to New York to avail themselves of our services.
We spend more money on special ed than California does, and California has like 1.5 times more students than we do. So, can we spend our money better? Yes. I mean, that's the kind of the emphasis of this report. It's a combination of not how much money we spend, but also how we spend our money. And we spend a disproportionate growing share of our funding on non-general education programming, whether it's transportation, buildings and grounds, special ed. We spend a disproportionate share on those, and we need to take a look at why we do so and what drives those costs.
But again, I mean, I'm not picking on them, I'm just pulling it out of the air here. I mean, there are requirements regarding transportation that has to be provided for private school students, depending on where you live, right?
And that's one of the larger shares of increases, tuition.
So the thing is, that's a politically toxic thing, because people who send their kids to private school, generally, not entirely, mass generalization here, have money, and generally they vote. I mean, again, these are things that are so difficult to address that the governor has been, all in on teacher evals and on testing and on everything else, but you never talk about these things. I don't hear them.
I mean, I would say the Common Core and APPR is just as controversial as dealing with special ed and mandated costs. So,
it is.
I think if there's the willpower and the willingness to address what drives school spending, we can really get at the root of what he's been talking about, why we're one of the highest spending states in the nation on schools. We have to address what drives the spending in order to address the fact that we spend the most.
But do you think it's possible to address those things and still get elected?
Yes, because we've done other things that are just as controversial and just as inflammatory as dealing with special ed or dealing with transportation or building expenses. I mean, again, there are ways to deliver special ed services without being so costly. We don't have to take away services. It's more of the administration and the bureaucracy and the hearing process. There's so many other steps. I mean, State Education Department came out, I know it's like 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, with a 30-page report that outlined 200 different examples of where the state of New York exceeded federal regulations for dealing with special ed students. So we go way above and beyond what's required by the federal government. Why? Well, I don't know. Why don't we examine that?
Well, we do it in Medicaid too.
Right, exactly. I mean, the governor created this Mandate Relief Council, what, 3, 4 years ago, and what happened with that? Nothing. I mean, so I think that it's all fine and dandy to say we're the highest spending, but they asked why we're doing it, why we're spending so much money, and what we're doing about it. It's only half the equation.
Okay, so two other things that we need to touch on. One is that the proportion, and you mentioned this, the proportion of the burden on the local taxpayer has grown.
Correct.
And that's
4%.
Problematic.
Yes.
Because, particularly as you cap property taxes,
Right.
you can't get blood from a stone.
Correct.
So how much longer until we reach some sort of tipping point here?
Well, the estimate for next year, right, tax cap, is based on the CPI of this year.
Yeah, it's almost nothing.
Right. Right now, for the first 7 or 8 months of this year, it's a negative 0.02. Yeah. So we'd be lucky to get to zero for next year. Which means that the local ability of a school district to raise money is going to be severely handicapped. We're going to have to make up that 0% tax cap with a huge infusion of state aid if we're just going to maintain our programs. Otherwise, we're going to have to start laying off all those teachers and other staff that we just started rehiring back. So I think the state needs to step up, or simultaneously further address making more changes to the tax cap. We've been advocating, along with the Educational Conference Board, going to just a flat 2% tax cap across the board.
Right.
Most people believe it's a 2% anyway, so why don't we just go to 2%?
It's not, right, yeah,
Right.
understood.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing is regarding the disparity, one, to be noted, and this is ongoing, it's being challenged in court.
Right.
The small city school districts are
And
challenging
CFE
that.
still is going on.
CFE continuing,
Part
right?
3.
So this is, this is the third iteration, correct?
Yeah.
So that's going on. But also we had, you note in the report, the gap elimination aid is not completely eradicated
Right.
yet.
There's still like $453 million left.
Okay,
believe.
I thought we addressed this problem.
Well, they put a down payment on. I mean, they've been phasing out the GEA, and next year hopefully will be the end of the GEA, which is a good thing. And then what we still have to do is phase in the foundation aid formula, which was promised back in 2007, and which was the intention of the foundation aid was to help address the disparity between spending between low and high need school districts. And that got waylaid by the Great Recession, which is understandable. But now that the state and our economy are back on track, we really should ramp up efforts to address the disparity that we've identified in this report.
Okay, so we're out of time, but we know that education, again, is going to be a big deal in the coming session. We'll talk to, obviously, the governor has a new Common Core Commission. We're still waiting to hear.
Yeah, which is pretty much unnecessary, given that the legislature and the governor gave the state education commissioner the...
Yes, we have discussed that on the show, but he's going to come out with his before she comes out with hers, so we'll talk. But also, your report is at www.nysabo.org.
Correct.
If people want to take a look at it. And Michael, I thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.